Sophie decided to spend what she had coined her crone years high in the mountains, in a tiny cottage. Her family thought this was a terrible idea, and that was precisely why she knew it was a good one. It was surprisingly inexpensive to acquire one. But after that, the real work began. Supplies, repairs, figuring out how the hell to make bread. But that first loaf that came out perfectly. "I am crone, and I am free," she shouted to the wind. She hiked down to the village every other day, and gradually crowded her cottage shelves with teacups in every color, along with trinkets that served no purpose but to please her. She filled her pantry with everything she needed by week, made glorious soups, and greeted every morning sunrise from her bath near the largest window. Then she started to paint. She had collected every color, her true purpose in coming to this little cottage life. Now the colors needed out. She set up her first canvas, spread out her many paints, and let the colors the sun had sent that day be her guide. The hours alone, color her only companion, made her feel just as she had imagined they would. She had just one neighbor, Hal, a salt and pepper fellow of 5 words or less. This suited her just fine. She had not come all the way up a mountain for company. "I have a freshwater spring on my side," he informed her on their first meeting. "Had a deal with the last tenant to bring some over every other day. You interested?" She was. Hal treated it himself. It was a luxury to replace the boiled tap water she currently endured. I am not the tenant," she informed him. "I'm the owner." Hal looked at all the half-started repairs, then at Sophie with her graying bun, and sniffed. "I give you 2 weeks." The next time he came, he caught her on the phone. It was not easy to operate a phone this far from civilization. Sophie had hoped it would be more of a deterrent than it was proving to be. "I hear you, yes," she said, trying to wrap it up as Hal quietly waited on her tiny veranda. "But the point is for you not to know where I am." She listened patiently to the complaints of several people on the other end. "I'm sure you'd like to visit, but I don't wish to be visited." Then she hung up the phone with a firm click. The window was wide open. She knew Hal heard everything. He said nothing about it as he put the water on her counter with strong arms. Then he slowly took stock of the sink repairs she was attempting. "You've got the elbow upside down," he said. He picked up the spare she had on the counter. "It goes like this," he showed her, turning it upside down. She quietly swore. She had tried everything but that. "Would you like some soup?" she asked him. "With bread?" You made bread, he asked, then seemed to regret blurting it, his enthusiasm for bread out before he could stop it. She smiled and cut them both a slice, then ladled them each a nice bowl of soup. He sat down across from her at her counter, pushing the pipe repair pieces aside, and took in the rest of the cottage. Today was a red day. She had her little red teacup out, and a teapot with strawberries on it, wore a red sweater over her dress, and had the sofa cushions, blanket and flowers in her place, all red as well. His eyebrows gave away the expression his beard tried to hide. "Is it always going to be red now?" Sophie laughed. "No, just today. What will tomorrow be?" "I let the sunrise decide," she told him. Those eyebrows lifted. "Free to change colors," she murmured into her red teacup. "Do you ever change yours?" He gave a huff of almost laughter. "A source of complaint in my previous life was that I never do. I am as you see me, and nothing more." Sophie studied his colors as he trekked the narrow winding path away from her cottage and back to his. Hal was firm, solid, forest neutrals, as solitary as the trees around him, and as plain as the stone. The way he belonged to the mountain made him peaceful to be around. That was his color, she decided. His color was peace. Soon the cottage was crowded with paintings, teacups and skies, flowers and trees, pies and bread. Sophie painted everything, every treasure the mountain and her life here brought her. The steam from a good cuppa, the clouds after a storm, the little vines on the rock face of the mountain. Hal stayed every other day for lunch, sometimes reading a book while she painted. He wore green on a green day, some weeks later, and laughed in delight. Well, looky here, I match the day, do I? Sophie shook her head at him, as she ladled soup into 2 green bowls. Why are you up here? He asked her, as they ate. There's a lot of places a person could escape to, he added cautiously. He didn't ask much, honestly. His comfortable silences had come to be one of her mountain treasures. They shifted color to match whatever day she found herself in. That peace and neutral that belonged to every color. Back home I lived in grays, she said simply. And not just around my family. Being crowded, it doesn't suit me. Up here I can be every color, as often as I please. Hal said nothing to this, but invited her to hike around to his side sometime, and watch the sunset. His cottage was very like him, stoic and minimal, with a solid wood veranda, looking out to the horizon. The woodwork all done by hand. He fussed and cursed as he walked her back around through the dark. Don't push it, Sophie, mind the edge. For Christ's sakes, it's dark, Sophie. And Sophie realized she had made a friend. Her mountain life was all very peaceful, until the day she took some of her paintings into town to see if anyone wanted them. They turned out to be quite popular, and she returned to the cottage empty-handed, thrilled to tell Hal her cherished hobby had given her some pocket money, and brought a little joy. But the next day, Deidre Green hiked all the way up the mountain from the village, holding one of Sophie's paintings of a teacup, and banged down the door to be let in. She barged in, ignoring Hal's, "Only you would think it's your right to be let in, Deidre Green," and propped the painting in a chair. "Watch this," Deidre declared. Then she reached her hand into the painting, and retrieved the cup of tea, pulling it out steaming, and very real. She took a sip. "It's delicious. Your paintings are magic." The idea of magic had always delighted Sophie, but she had never seen any real magic of her own, just the suggestion of it in beautiful things. This irrefutable proof was absolutely wild. The magic seemed to last as long as the paintings did. Sophie was inundated with requests: gorgeous beaches, stunning ballrooms, highly specific cakes, jewelry, clothes. The villagers wanted it all. Hal watched her paint until she was exhausted, and his grump since the discovery of her magic intensified. "They can wait, Sophie," he growled one particularly bad day, when an unexpected downpour set her back on her latest beach painting, before she hurried it inside. "Don't lose your joy of it." She burned a soup and ruined a bread, and forgot to pick a new color one morning. She was quite flush with cash, which was unexpected. Hal caught her counting it one morning, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. "Oh well, counting up your earnings, are you?" he barked. "I supposed you will head off to be rich and famous now, with your new gift." Sophie gaped at him in surprise. "What on earth? No. I thought I might improve the pipes though. Get some reliable plumbing at last. Improve that big window I love." "You can't be serious," he scoffed. "Are you saying you'd miss me?" she teased. "I said no such thing."
Yeah.
But he had. Sophie gave him a sidelong look. "Why haven't you asked me for a painting? Why haven't you made yourself a painting?" he countered. Sophie sat back in her chair. "The real art is being here," she said. "I want the real thing, not an imitation of it." Hal hesitated, his steaming coffee in his hands. He rarely hesitated about anything. "That's why I'm up here," he said quietly. "I want the real things, not the imitations." That understanding, Sophie realized, was a treasure she didn't know she needed. The next day, she finally caught up with her long list of commissions. She flopped down on her sofa, yellow everything today, and took a nap. When Hal hiked over, she had no lunch ready, but he surprised her with a travel container of piping hot stew. "I'm no chef," he warned.
Yeah.
"But I had a feeling you wouldn't cook today. You had, 15 left?" She nodded, exhausted. "I'm taking a break," she said. "Actually a full hiatus, possibly retirement." "Good." She waited until the stew was cleaned away, and their cherished comfortable silence had soothed all her nerves. Hal often brought a book. His cottage was full of them. They were his treasures. He was reading one now, his glasses low on his nose, his feet on her coffee table. "I made you one," she said. "Made me what?" "A painting." He looked startled. Why? I want you to have this one. You shouldn't have, he said gruffly, his beard hiding his real feelings. It's a bit big. I can help you carry it home if you like. She walked out with it and watched him study it long and hard. Is this a joke? He asked. It is not, she confirmed. Sophie, it's blank. It's not blank. There are no colors, he said. Is that how you think of me? I want you to hang it up when you get home, she said. He looked very offended, snatched it from her hands. Fine. He accepted no help carrying it awkwardly. The long hike back around to his cottage, and all Sophie could do was wait and hope. The time passed. That was Hal's usual hike home. Sophie went to the little hall between her rooms where she had hung a matching canvas to the one she gifted Hal. She waited and waited. Finally the canvas shifted, just as she'd hoped it would, when she painted it. A moment later Hal was staring back at her through the painting, as though a door had opened between their cottages, as easily as if they were a room apart. Sophie grinned. You didn't. Hal gasped. I did, she confirmed. Now you can come whenever you like. Watch the sunrise and the sunset. Match whatever color takes my fancy, if you want. She finished uncertainly. Maybe she'd gone too far. But Hal's face slowly bloomed into a delight his beard could not hide. She had made more than a friend. The best surprise of this cottage life. A better magic than her colors becoming enchanted paintings. This was a color with no name. I want to, he said, and stepped through to meet her. Steam rising from the kettle, sunlight seeping in through the crack of my floral shades, my mint green tea timer resting on the kitchen counter, an empty bottle sitting next to it, the crisscross pattern on my gray wool socks. 5 things I can see. Standing in the kitchen, bleary-eyed and groggy, I brush a pile of curls off my forehead, rest my elbow against the cold formica counter, rub the soft flannel of my pajama shirt, and finally tap my foot against the terrazzo. That's 4 things I can touch. Adrian pads his way into the kitchen behind me. Gentle steps across the floor. The low rumble of the water whistles to a boil. Then the clink of 2 glasses being placed in the sink sends my body and brain into a slow simmer of its own. 3 things I can hear. He stands beside me as he reaches over my head and pulls down 2 mugs from my creaky wooden cabinet. I don't turn my head to look at him. I'm still trying to ground myself from the anxiety spiral I'm in after last night. But I don't need to search far for 2 things I can smell. His earthy wood smoke and winter mint scent surrounds me as he places the mugs on the counter. He crosses the room toward the cupboard, presumably to retrieve my tea box. What number are you on? He asks. The fact that he knows me well enough to know I'm in coping mechanism mode brings me down another notch. There's still one of my senses left to find. I touch my fingertips to my mouth, where I can still taste the honey-sweet press of his kiss on my lips. Almost done, I say. 5 slow breaths in and out, and I'm at least stable enough to turn and look at him now. I slowly face him as he shuffles back into my space bubble. Are you wearing my robe? He leans against the counter next to me, all sleep mussed and dreamy-eyed. It's so cozy, Mel. Despite the smoldering sensation brewing in my chest, I grin as I nod my head. I'm aware. So are your slippers, he says around a yawn, rubbing his right foot against my left. I glance down at my pale pink slippers, covered in tiny strawberries. I thought those looked familiar. I say. He dangles a tea bag in front of my nose, and I reach up to take it from him. I always smell my tea before settling it in my cup. His hand lingers on mine, and I tense at the contact, if only to resist snuggling into him. He gently squeezes before letting go. On a shaky inhale, I sniff the tea leaves. An aroma of chamomile settles all the way in the center of my chest. Birdsong fills the air outside my kitchen window. He places his winter rooibos tea in his mug, and I busy myself, pouring water over them to let them steep. It's all so familiar, except for the unspoken tension that comes from kissing your best friend the night before. Then for Adrian's part, he's mellow as ever. The picture of contentment, standing here in my kitchen, wearing my robe and drinking my tea, and unknowingly holding my heart in his hand. "So, are we going to talk about last night?" he asks. "Nope," I say, far too quickly. I stare at the steam drifting up and away from my mug, and reach for my tea timer, setting it for 7 minutes. He gently bumps his arm against my shoulder. "Shimon Mel." I shiver at the contact, feeling off balance. I don't think I could do my grounding exercises right now, even if I wanted to. My senses are all officially overwhelmed by Adrian, boiled down to one confusing nameless emotion. "Shimon, hey, you're cold," he says, already untying the belt of my robe and pulling it off his broad shoulders, that I'm constantly trying not to notice. I'm not that cold, but I don't stop him from slipping the cotton snugly around me and tying the belt into a tiny bow at my waist. This is the effect Adrian has always had on me. All 10 years of our friendship have been a fever dream of yearning for moments like this, then freezing when they happen, because I know that for him it's all just fun. I've existed as his best friend all this time, and it was manageable for me when I didn't know for sure what it was like to be fully engulfed by him. Like last night. "Better?" he asks. Better isn't the word I'd use. It's borderline unbearable to feel so much at once like this. I mumble, steeping my tea bag just so I have something to do with my hands. He's facing me now, my gaze set on my woolen socks, pressed up against the edges of the slippers he's wearing. They must be at least 2 sizes too small on him. He tips my face up. "Why can't we talk about it?" "Why not?" Shimon does he. "Because I've only dared to long for this to happen for years, and now that it has, I don't know what to do." Somewhere between the two of us getting back to my place after his sister's wedding last night, to splitting the last of the cider left in my fridge, while sitting on my couch, laughing about how his impromptu joke was a flop during his speech, my punch-drunk brain decided one kiss would finally set me free from this constant ache to be closer to him. Except once he pulled me into his lap, and our lips pressed together. All I wanted was more. It took everything in me to stop it from going further once my brain caught up with my heart, because that was part of the deal. "Remember? I was your fake date to the wedding. We were pretending for one night. Now, it's a new day." All night, we joked about fake dating in glass slippers, and his electric car turning into a pumpkin. When he pulled me close on the couch, I was giddy. "We're still on a fake date until midnight," I'd said. In a whisper he told me he'd wanted to kiss me all night. "So there's nothing to talk about, not even how you panicked and left me on your couch after we kissed," he says, bringing me back to the present. At each tick of the tea timer, my brain supplies another reason why I'm terrified to have this conversation. What I'm most afraid to hear him say. "It won't change things. It didn't mean anything. We can just go back to being friends." 10 years of avoiding this scenario, and I screw it up in one night. "Please, Mel, say something." There's an unsteadiness to his voice that I'm not used to, and when I dare to meet his eyes, they're darker than their usual golden brown, sweltering. His cheeks are flushed. His hand taps against the counter. There's something almost desperate about him right now. All his usual ease replaced by anxious energy. For all the times he's been by my side, through anxiety and panic attacks, he deserves the same. For the first time, I'm struck that I'm not the only one who stands to lose something here. I'm terrified of what he might say. But the kiss was mutual, and it's not fair of me to hold back just to spare my own feelings at the expense of his, whatever they may be. He taps my forehead 3 times, the delicate touch setting me aflame. "Please tell me what's brewing up here. Sometimes I think it can't just be me. Like we've been on some sort of simmering precipice, almost as long as we've known each other. That might actually be what scares me the most. The idea that it could all change, that in the process of our relationship it falls apart instead. I need to let him put me out of my misery and figure out how to go back to being just friends and forget what it feels like to have all of me pressed up against all of him on the couch. I intend to say this to him. The part about being friends. I inhale and practice it in my head. Then inexplicably, a different set of words pour out of my mouth entirely. What did you mean in your speech at the wedding? It wasn't what you practiced. For someone who spends so much of her time overthinking, I sure can be impulsive when it comes to Adrian. We'd laughed about it last night, how he went off script from the speech he'd been practicing. Instead naming all the times he could tell his sister was in love with Quinn before she finally admitted it. Then he tried to finish with a joke, but botched it and just ended the speech with a toast to fall. He scratches at the back of his neck, backing up slightly. This time it's him who is putting space between us. Not impressed with my improv, he says, voice strangled. It's strange to see Adrian, who is usually the rock, faltering under my gaze for once. It makes me feel braver. If you regret the kiss, please just tell me. I say, we can go back to the way things were. Pretend it never happened. Whatever you want. His eyes are Earl Grey now, and my heartbeat is in my throat. I don't, my chest splits in half, and a tear springs from my eye. Him not wanting to be friends anymore is exactly why I was afraid of this. I understand, I say. I never should have kissed you, knowing I was the only one with feelings. It doesn't have to ruin our friendship. Confusion passes over his features. 5 things I can see. His forehead wrinkles, his eyes soften again. Green tea on a summer day. The smattering of freckles across the bridge of his nose. The tiny scar on his chin. Pale cheeks flushed. Some sort of understanding seems to settle. He's figuring out I'm in love with him. And even in my worst nightmares about him rejecting me, it never felt this tragic. His hand closes over mine on the counter. He's trying to let me down easy. I'm sure. That's where you're wrong, Mel. My lips quiver. You don't want to stay friends. He shakes his head ruefully, thumb brushing over my knuckle, and take a deep inhale of his own. The time we were at IHOP, and the server spilled orange juice on my lap, and you laughed so hard that you knocked your iced tea over on yourself. I stare at him, feeling disoriented by the long ago memory. The night that woman from the dating app stood me up, and you met me at the bar, and we ended up singing karaoke until 2 a.m. A laugh escapes, even though I'm still wildly confused. You told the Lyft driver you were Prince reincarnated on the way home. He grins, looking more like himself again. Yesterday when I picked you up to drive to the ceremony, and the second you saw me you threw your arms around me and whispered, "Hey there." Fake dates into my ear. My skin pricks. Our friendship really is perfect as is. He shakes his head. Nah, Mel. Oh. I went off script because all I could think about the whole night was every moment over the past 10 years where I was in love with you. I don't regret the kiss. You're not the only one with feelings. Tears are cascading down my cheeks now. And you just realized it last night. Ooh. During our fake date, he pulls me closer, and I nestle into him until I'm flush against his chest. I've known it for a long time, he says, into my hair. Why didn't you just tell me? He laughs and brushes a kiss to my forehead. You're not the only one who's allowed to be scared, you know. Relief stirs in my chest, then emanates. I get to the pieces of Adrian I already loved and collect more. It's not over. Happiness pulls to the surface and I'm giddy. I think, well, I've been in love with you longer. The whole time. He grins. Your competitive streak, it's on my list. I'm stunned but not stunned. The fear that he might feel the same way was always overshadowed by the fear he wouldn't. Did you know I felt the same? The whole time. His hand traces up and down my arm. I had my suspicions, but I always knew I had to wait for the right time. I know how hard change is for you, how your brain needs to be in the right place to accept something new. Last night it felt like you were there. I never wanted you to be hasty or regret me. Having you there was enough, but I've always wanted more. I've been in lost. I repeat with a smile. He brushes my curls away from my face, holding my cheeks in his hands. When we kiss again, you're not going to try to hide from me. I slip my arms around his waist. No, I said. I may in fact ignite. If I don't get closer to him right this second. For how long this feeling has been brewing. The tea timer chimes behind us. Tea is ready, he said. I smile and warmth fills me to the brim. Nobody at NASA gave a goddamn about the weather in Jersey. This fact, as true and as simple as it was, had not stopped my Aunt Rosie from pacing around the parlor all morning and pressing her face to the front window in search of thunderstorms. My mother had yelled at her for smearing rouge on the glass, and she of course had yelled right back, and soon everybody was yelling. It was the day of my brother Eddie's wedding, the day of the moon landing, and rain meant a lot of things. It meant a shower of good fortune pouring out from God himself, amen, onto the newlyweds. But it also meant the destruction of our poor astronauts, one of whom was a good Jersey boy, spacemen who were already so far outside our atmosphere that nothing happening here could do anything to them. It didn't matter though, not to Rosie. They would be struck by lightning, and they would plummet into the Atlantic, and they would die, and we'd lose the race. But it didn't rain. It was goddamn muggy though. Muggy enough to cause the streamers tied to the back of Eddie and Marie's limousine to half melt and make colors streak down the white. But it didn't rain. I stepped out the reception into the parking lot that evening to light up a cigarette, a loner from the pocket of my too-tight tuxedo. The restaurant itself was empty by now. I could see the tables through the windows. Marie's father had only rented the back room because he was a cheap ass, but even though the party was starting to fade, cousins and friends rushing home to watch whatever was going to happen, I could still hear the stragglers through the closed door. Striking up a match from the book I'd snagged from the front counter, I watched the smoke furl upward toward the moon. They were up there right now. That was goddamn insane. They were up there and I was standing here, looking up at them. And maybe some part of me really could reach them like this. I thought, maybe they would see my cigarette smoke, and they would know I was here. So few people really did. You all better hurry. You gotta get there before Marie does. Rosie yammered, rushing out my parents' front door after my uncle, who was waving his arms at her. I know, Ron. I know. Start the goddamn car, would you? Listen, Eddie. If you see her in the dress, it's bad luck. Bad luck. Curse on your house. You'll never have children, and it'll break my heart. Get to the church, get inside, and God help you don't look out any windows. And so we did. That afternoon, me and Eddie and the 3 other groomsmen, only one of whom was good looking, squeezed into the back of a Lincoln Continental. They had shoved past me shouting for the radio, and climbing in last, I watched from my place in the rear, as the 4 of them leaned over the front like gargoyles. The chauffeur, which I guess is what you call a person in this line of work, was actually wearing one of those little caps you see on television. He already had the broadcast running, and we sat there on the curb together, and listened. We're gonna be late, they're gonna yell at us, Eddie. But no one paid me any mind, because, just like that, it was really happening. The radio counted down the descent, and when the Eagle finally landed, and nothing exploded, the car, even the driver, erupted into cheers. With that, as if noticing the time, the vehicle revved and swerved as it took off, nearly hitting the sidewalk and taking out a lamppost. I gripped the door handle. The streets in which I had grown up, the school, the druggist, passed by in a technicolor blur of familiar sights and sounds. Everything was exactly the same as it had always been. But just like that, it was different too. The world was different, so this would be a moment, I realized. From here on out, there would be everything before it, and everything after it. We had to take a detour to loop around, because a road was closed, and Marie and her bridesmaids had arrived in the time it took. They watched St. John's rising in the distance. The woman in a pink dress, someone's sister, was trying to flag us down as we rolled up, and I learned later that she had to lock Marie behind a door in the basement where nobody could get a good look at her, on account of curses and all. I took a long inhale of my cigarette, allowing my eyes to flutter closed, when I heard the metal door to the hall slam open, followed by the crunching stride of shoes on the pavement. It was not my brother sneaking off to start his honeymoon early, or one of his drunk buddies, or even my father, trying to get away from Aunt Rosie. No, it was a waiter, a tall guy in a greenish vest, his brow glistening with sweat from the kitchen. He was freckled. I remember thinking, they crept up his neck, onto his cheeks, and along his forearms, revealed by his rolled-up sleeves, like burning wildflowers, ruddy clouds dotting his skin like poppies. He nearly crashed into me in what may have been anger or frustration, a temperament as red as he was. I wasn't watching, he muttered hurriedly, running a hand through his orange hair, and offering something of an apologetic, gap-toothed smile. "You're fine, pal. No harm done. You good?" Yeah. Cigarette break. "You got a light?" I nodded, handing over the book of matches, as he pulled a carton of Luckies from his back pocket. He lit one up, and gave me a nod, blowing his first puff over his shoulder, as if to be polite, as if I were not an expert in the same goddamn bad habit he was. "Thanks a million. You're allowed to smoke inside, you know. Guests are. Not me. I gotta come out here," he explained. "Oh, my mom don't know I do it," I replied with something of a weak laugh, shrugging my shoulders. I spoke up again, only to fill the abrupt silence. "And she also don't know that she does too. Out the bathroom window. You know, to be sneaky?" He laughed the way a movie star laughs, full-bodied and hearty golden, before blowing out another cloud of smoke. It mingled with mine, and together, it whirled upward toward Aldrin and Armstrong. "It looks like a nice wedding," he said. "You with the bride or groom?" "The groom's my brother," I replied, deciding I really should be less of a brute. Then I stuck out a hand to shake. "Dominic Moretti. People call me Dom. People call me Barty." He watched me smoke for a moment, before flashing a grin, cigarette nestling securely into the space between his teeth. "I bet you they're missing you in there, Dom. Saw you really cutting a rug earlier. No one even knows I'm gone." But I knew what he had meant. The band had struck up an old favorite, and I, swaying to the music, found my arms wrapped around the pink chiffoned back of bridesmaid Nan Chabowski, 26, pretty and bored. For the moment, she did not sway with me, regarding me the way a person regards socks on Christmas. "They're fine, of course, but not what you wanted." Still, I had been paired with her during the wedding, and I guess we were supposed to dance together. Everyone else was. She draped her wrists over my shoulders, not really touching me, but making it look like she was. She kept peering around the room. "They landed on the moon safe, you know. We heard on the radio," I said, trying to strike up some kind of conversation. "Uh-huh," Nan replied, glancing over her own shoulder, nose wrinkling. "You haven't seen Joey, have ya?" I told him I'd save a dance for him back at the church, but Marie paired him with Rita on account of them both being giants. "God, I hate being this petite," she huffed, turning back to meet my eye level, which of course meant that I was also petite. "No, I ain't seen him." "Oh well," she hummed, turning back around and continuing to scan the room. "Maybe I can make this work. If he sees us having a real swell time, I can say, 'How old did you say you were?' You're Eddie's younger brother, right?" "I'm 19. Today actually. It's my birthday." "Oh, teenager." Sighing, I tossed my cigarette to the ground and crushed it beneath the toe of my dress shoe. "I don't really know that girl, you know. She's just friends with my brother's wife. I danced with her to be nice," I replied, leaning back casually and crossing my arms, like in a western, but looking more crabby than cool. Barty gave another one of those boisterous laughs at that. I studied the way his whole body seemed to shake with the life of it, and I found I was almost jealous of him, of how he laughed. I could not remember ever laughing like that. Besides, you should be nice to me, I added quickly, if only to distract myself from Barty's form. I'm a customer. I'm always right, ain't I? And it's my birthday. His eyes widened. Wait, what? Your brother picked your birthday to get married? Ain't that a goddamn bite? Now it'll be his anniversary. And not your birthday. That's sorta low, if you don't mind me saying so. But I guess I already said it. I mean, it was the only day the church had. I'm not sour about it. I get it. Weddings are a big deal and all that. Well, happy birthday, Dominic Moretti. He met my eye, holding my gaze for only a moment, before blowing another cloud of smoke over his shoulder. Yeah, thanks. Turns out, you're the only one to tell me that today. No fooling. I'm sorry. Birthdays are rotten things. I turned 19 in January myself. I think I've hated being 19. 18 was better, but I've always really loved being born in January. Feels like standing in a doorway almost. 1 year's done, so the next one starts right up with me. I can count them on myself. I offered a nod at that, before pointing up at the sky to the moon. More than half of it was covered in shadow, so that we could see only the curve of its milk-white edge jutting out among the stars. Tonight's a doorway too, you know, I said. They're up there on the moon. Do you think they landed on the shadow part or the light part? I clicked my tongue, nostrils flaring. Who cares, I guess. Buzz Aldrin's from right here in Jersey, you know. But, before tonight, no one has ever been up there. And now they have. We have. It's insane, ain't it? I can't stand it. Everyone's home waiting to see them walk out, and we're all stuck here eating goddamn chicken. I sniffed, flailing my arms a bit to gesture at the restaurant. Sorry, it was good chicken, Barty laughed. I don't give a damn about the chicken, Dom. I didn't cook it, and yeah, maybe everyone's sitting at home, and maybe we're sitting here, but they're up there, the people who really matter. So how about that, huh? Not one of us is up there. That's how it goes. Everyone's always doing something better, and nobody ever gets to do what they want. He continued dully, shrugging his shoulders. For a moment, he glanced back to the hall doors, which still sat shut tight. Oh, what do you want to do then? Other than this, I mean, I guess work in other people's weddings isn't really all that good of a time. I rambled. Did you always want to work in a restaurant? I wait tables, Dom. I ain't a chef, or even goddamn maître d'. He scoffed, taking another long drag of smoke. It whirled around his lips. No, you know what I want. I saw in a magazine once, there's this monster that lives in a lake in Scotland. Back in the 1930s, this surgeon took a picture of it. An actual doctor. So it's true. Well, I want to go there and find it myself. Bring it back here to Middlesex County. I mean, maybe I ain't on the moon. Nah. But I can still explore everything here, can't I? He seemed to surge with this insistence, shoulders rolling, face growing bright and boyish, enough to make a person believe. He glowed. Really, with this kind of light, I was noticing for the first time ever, one that could put the crowded moon to blushing shame, and make me blush too. Well, why don't you then? Well, why don't you go in there and tell everyone it's your birthday, and they'd better not forget it. I did not have an answer to this, so slumping a bit, I simply shrugged my shoulders. Barty's features softened, as if he had realized he had struck some hidden part of me, the scar of maybe where God had torn my rib out. I was the one to speak up again. You know, sometimes I think my folks had me just in case my brother got hit by a bus. Not that he was ever gonna die for real, or nothing, but just to, you know, sort of be a backup, in case. I laughed, but I knew I was only half joking. That was smart of him, Barty replied, giving my shoulder a light shove, an almost over-friendly gesture. I found myself leaning into the contact, chasing some of his glow, as if it could reflect back on me. Having a backup, I mean. I don't know what's happening tomorrow. The asshole in there, he's gonna fire me tonight. No, Don't tell me he ain't. He's not done it yet, but when I walk back in there, he's gonna. I broke a dish, and he shouted at me, so I told him to kiss my ass for good luck. He patted his back pocket, where his cigarette carton was sticking out. Nobody'll even notice I'm gone neither. Not really. No one ever notices nothing. I knew what he meant. I really knew it. But before I could reply, I watched Barty toss his lit cigarette to the ground in a flurry of smoldering ash, extending both his arms upward, then stretching himself tall, like the neck of that lake monster. He used both his hands to wave, rolling with the full force of himself, the way folks wave at trains and ships. I see him, Dom, he declared, extending one finger to point. His feet left the ground in that moment, and he seemed to jump, giving into this strange, beautiful abandon. I see him right up there, on the surface, and they're waving right back at me. A strong hand shot out to grab the sleeve of my jacket, and he tugged me closer, making me spring upward along with him. I bounded, taking a giant leap of my own, a gasp escaping my throat, and looking up at the moon. I thought I could see them up there too. Neil and Michael, and even Buzz from Jersey. I jumped, and I laughed, and I waved. The whole world, the whole goddamn world, was looking at them, and so was I. But they were looking at me. They were looking at me, and so was Barty. He had fallen back, crossing his arms, smiling from ear to ear, with that goddamn gap, watching my routine, my leaping and my waving. And he saw me. I thought he really saw me. For the very first time, in my entire life, someone saw me. He laughed again, and with it, I found myself buzzing. I fell into him completely, then wrapping arms around his shoulders, and tugging him into an odd exuberant half-dance. We laughed, and we leapt, all arms and legs. When we leaned in closer, I too could see him, the sublime way the moon played on his face, and I thought, I really let myself think. I mean that I could have kissed him, and he would have let me. But we knew who we were, and we knew where we were. I fell back. He did not just yet. But Aunt Rosie barreled through the door to the back room, looking from me to Barty, and then back again. She huffed as we separated. There you are, Dom. What are you roughhousing? Today of all days. Hurry. We're all gonna go over to your folks and watch the television. Coming, Ro, I said. And as she disappeared inside again, I met Barty's eye. Hey, you better get going. Tonight's the big night, right? Yesterday was just yesterday. But tomorrow, everything will be different. I don't know what's happening tomorrow. He fell silent, his brow furrowing. You know everything's gotta be the way it was first. And then one day, it can all be different. That's how it goes. Yeah, anything can happen now, can't it? 'Cause they were up there. Maybe. As I turned to leave, I looked back, managing an uncertain smile. I hope you catch that monster, Barty. There's men on the moon, so there are. Happy birthday, spaceman. And this would be a moment, I realized. From here on out, there would be everything before it, and everything after it. I just launched. I wondered when my eagle would land.